Okay, kindly, okay, it's okay now. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, Doc, we can see it now.
Thank you very much, Prof. Okay, so again, good afternoon, everyone. So yesterday, the last topic that I presented was all about how we will be able to establish our research instruments. And we mentioned in establishing our research instruments, you need to have the idea whether there's an existing instrument or measurement for a particular construct. And if there's none, of course, we need to develop a new instrument. And I mentioned yesterday that in developing a new instrument, we need to perform factor analysis, including exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis. On the other hand, if, for example, let's say there's already an existing instrument or measurement for a particular construct, then we need to read and check the validity and reliability of the construct. Okay, from there, you can start now designing your instrument by checking on or considering the dimensionality of the construct, checking the items of each construct, and establishing the formats and lengths of our research instruments. Okay. Then, of course, once you finish designing your instrument, I mentioned you need to perform phase and content validity so that we can be assured that all items were identified properly. And at the same time, performing phase and content validity will somewhat assure us in the pre-testing phase that our instrument is okay. So once we're done with our phase and content validity, then we need to perform a reliability and validity test by checking internal consistency through Cronbach's alpha and composite reliability. And of course, when we talk about validity of our constructs, we measure it through convergent and discriminant validity. And this phase, we call it as Spilo testing. Okay. If you still remember also yesterday, we mentioned that in designing our questionnaire, there are two methods that we can use in our data collection. One is what we call interviewer administered, wherein the data collector is present while the questionnaire is being answered it is being being answered by the participants or respondents. So it means that the data collector guides the respondent in answering that different items or sections of our research instruments. On the other hand, self-administered question is also another method of data collection wherein we allow our respondents to independently answer our research questionnaire. Okay, so here there's no need for the presence of data collector. What is important in self-administered questionnaire is you have a clear instruction on how the items will be answered by these respondents. Okay. We also mentioned yesterday that there are three ways on how we can design our research instruments. We have what we call adapting with O, wherein you will be adapting a particular, or you will be using a prior instrument or measurement, and you will be utilizing it nearly verbatim. On the other hand, we also have what we call adapt with A, wherein you will be adapting or utilizing previous instrument or a measurement, but you will be
number ko na, class? Limutan ko na. 24 ba? 24?
Okay, you will be altering the instrument significantly. Okay.
Ayun. Mute ko muna tong training na to. Okay, 24. So, yung example natin, 2/3 times
technical, kindly mute our participants so that we cannot be distracted. Technical, thank you.
Okay, so again, as I mentioned, if for example, we will be adapting with A, it means we will be utilizing a prior studies instrument or measurement, then we will try to alter significantly the instruments, okay? And of course, develop a new instrument, meaning you're going to do an instrument from the scratch. And in designing a research instrument, you need to consider the types of variables or constructs you will be using. So we mentioned yesterday, the difference between observed and unobserved variables. So when we say observed variables are also called as manifest variables, these are variables that can be directly measured, such as, for example, you want to know the gender, the marital status, the age of the respondents. So these variables can be directly measured. So we call them as observed variables or manifest variables. On the other hand, we have also variables that cannot be measured directly, such as, let's say, the level of job satisfaction, the level of organizational commitments, intention to quit, and grades. So these are examples of unobserved variables or latent variables. In order for us to quantify these latent variables, then we typically use a scale, okay, such as, for example, a Likert scale. Okay. Yesterday also, I mentioned that another thing that you need to consider in developing your instrument is whether you will be using reflective or formative construct. I think this is one of the neglected aspect of designing an instrument, because in most cases, I think most students feel that all constructs are the same. Pare-pareho silang construct, lalo na if they are latent variables or unobserved variables. It means once they see a measurement or a prior studies instrument, they always think that this instrument will be measured same way, like for example, the use of 5-point Likert scale throughout. Okay, but in reality, constructs can be classified into two. We have what we call reflective construct and formative construct. So what is the difference between reflective and formative construct? So let's start with a reflective construct. So when we talk about reflective construct, it is a construct where the items or indicators represent the latent variable. Okay, so if you still remember, when we talk about latent variable, these are variables that are considered unobserved, okay, such as, for example, job satisfaction. So for example, let's say we have a construct, job satisfaction, okay, and let's say there are 3 items, okay, meron siyang tatlong items, let's name it as JS1, JS2, and JS3. And let's say these are the 3 items that measure job satisfaction. One of the characteristics of a reflective construct is all the items, these 3, okay, or indicators really represent job satisfaction. Okay, so that is one of the characteristics of a reflective construct. Number 2, a reflective construct is characterized by highly correlated items or indicators. What do I mean when we say highly correlated items or indicators? It simply means that if, for example, the respondents will be answering the items for job satisfaction, their answers are usually moving in one direction. So for example, let's say, ang job satisfaction natin, pinameasure natin siya using 5-point Likert scale, where 5 means strongly agree, and let's say 1 means strongly disagree. Okay? So let's say 5-point Likert scale ang ginamit natin. Now, in order for us to consider that job satisfaction is a reflective construct, it means the responses of the respondents are moving in one direction. It means if their answer is moving, for example, towards agreement side or one direction towards disagreement side. Okay, so tawag natin dyan highly correlated items. And number 3, deletion of an item or indicator will not affect the meaning of the latent construct. What does it mean? Assuming, let's say, meron kang tatlong items and let's say you're going to delete 1. Aalisin mo, let's say, yung job satisfaction 1. So may matitira ka na lang na dalawang items for job satisfaction. Now, these 2 items will not affect the meaning of the latent construct. Okay, so this tool will still measure job satisfaction. Okay, so that is the characteristic of what we call a reflective construct. Later, I will give you a specific example. On the other hand, when we talk about formative construct, a formative construct is a construct that is characterized by items or indicators that causes the latent variable. It means if, for example, we have again job satisfaction, but this time, i-measure natin siya formatively. So kung meron siyang tatlong items, let's say JS1 again, 2 and 3, okay, it means these 3 items or indicators are the causes of job satisfaction. Okay? So ito yung causes ng job satisfaction. Number 2, in a formative construct, it is characterized by not highly correlated items. It means the responses, the overall responses of the respondents are not moving in one direction. Okay, it means may posibleng sumagot na agree towards agree, may mga sumagot na towards disagree, meron naman neutral. So magkakaiba-iba. So it means they are not highly correlated. And number 3, a formative construct is characterized by deletion of an item or indicator may affect the meaning of the latent construct. It means if we will be deleting, for example, job satisfaction 1, nagbabago yung meaning ng job satisfaction construct mo. Okay? So that is the difference between our reflective and a formative construct. If you will be reviewing published papers, ano ang usual na ginagamit? Usually they use reflective construct. If I will be quantifying it, maybe around 80 to 90% ng mga published papers na gumagamit ng quantitative research, typically they use reflective construct. Around 20, siguro mga 15, I can say mga 10 to 15% lang siguro. Okay, ang gumagamit ng mga formative construct. But of course, of course, it is a must for our students to fully understand reflective constructs and formative constructs because the way we measure them are differently. So later, papakita ko yung mga sample published papers about these two. Okay. So if we will be putting our discussion using an illustration, ganito yung illustration ng reflective and formative construct. So let's assume meron tayong construct, let's name it as job satisfaction. And let's say yung job satisfaction natin is a reflective construct. This X1, X2, and X3, let's assume that these are the items or indicators of job satisfaction. Through an illustration, we can properly differentiate reflective from formative construct through the direction of the arrow. Okay? You will see here, if the construct is a reflective construct, the movement is from the construct going to the item. Okay, palabas siya from construct papunta sa item. On the other hand, kapag naman siya formative construct, let's say this is job satisfaction, the movement is from the item going to the construct. Okay? Yon ang difference ng dalawa using these two illustration. Okay? So you will see here, kapag ang construct mo, yung variable mo, reflective siya. Okay? So the movement of the arrow is from the construct going to the items. While if it is formative, it is from the items going to the construct. Okay? So through illustration, nadi-differentiate din natin yung dalawang klase ng construct. Okay? So let's have an example. Assuming, let's say, we want to measure satisfaction. And satisfaction here refers to the respondent satisfaction to a particular hotel. Okay? So gusto natin i-measure yung level ng satisfaction ng mga pumunta dun sa hotel na yon. Okay? So let's try to analyze now the construct and the corresponding items. If you will be looking at this one, ito yung ating construct. Okay? And let's assume that we will be treating it as a reflective construct. Okay? And these are the 3 items that measure satisfaction. Okay, so let's try to analyze further. So let's try to analyze the first indicator or the first item. In the first item, it says, I feel well in this hotel. Okay, so it has something to do with the feeling of the respondent towards the hotel. Okay, number 2, I'm always happy to stay in this hotel. So it has something to do with staying in the hotel. And number 3, I recommend this hotel to others. So it is about recommendation. Let's assume that we will be measuring this one using 5-point Likert scale, where 5 means strongly agree and 1 means strongly disagree. Okay, so let's assume ito yung gagamitin nating measurement, 5-point Likert scale. So let's try to answer them one by one. Let's start with I feel well in this hotel. So let's assume you went to that hotel, you stayed in that hotel, and you really felt well in that hotel. What would be your possible answer on this based on the Likert scale? So most probably, you're going to answer 5, strongly agree. Now, if you felt well in that hotel, and you were asked, I am always happy to stay in this hotel. So most probably, if you felt well in that hotel, most probably you're going to be happy to stay in that hotel. Okay, so most probably your answer here is 4 or 5. Agree. So let's let's have a score of 5. And of course, if you felt well and you were happy to stay in that hotel, most probably you're going to recommend this hotel to others. And let's say your answer is number 5, also strongly agree. Now, you will see here in this example, all the answers falls under the agreement sign of our scale. So this is an example of what we call highly correlated items. So if the items are highly correlated, it means they are moving in one direction, then the construct is what we call a reflective construct. Okay? On the other hand, let's have another example. So let's assume that we also want to measure satisfaction, but this time we will be using formative. Okay? As I mentioned, a formative is characterized by not highly correlated items. Okay? So let's try to measure satisfaction formatively. So same pa rin yan. We are talking about satisfaction of the clients towards a particular hotel. Let's try to analyze the 3 items here. So item 1 says the service is good. So the first item has something to do with the service that the hotel provided to their guests. Number 2, the personnel are friendly. So personnel here, or the second item talks about the friendliness of the personnel. Remember, the first one has something to do with service. The second one has something to do with the personnel. Let's try to see number 3. The room is well equipped. So item number 3 is about room. Okay? Now, let's try to answer these items using 5-point Likert scale, where 5 means strongly agree again and 1 means strongly disagree. Okay, so let's assume this is the scale that we will be using. So let's try to answer the items. Number 1, the service is good. Let's assume that based on your experience, you really had good service from the hotel. So most probably your answer is agreement. Let's say 5. Okay. Number 2, the personnel are friendly. Okay. For example, if the service is good, but it doesn't guarantee, okay, automatic that personnel are friendly. And let's assume you experience a rude personnel, 1 rude personnel. So what would be your answer in number 2? So most probably your answer is 1 or 2. So let's say 2. Disagree. And number 3, the room is well equipped. And based on your experience, the room is okay. So your answer is, let's say, is 3. Neutral. Okay? You will see here, the responses are not moving in one direction. Iba-iba yung direction nila. Therefore, this construct was measured formatively. Okay? So you will see here, in this example, okay, we have 2 constructs here. The first one was measured reflectively, and the second one was measured formatively. And you will see there are differences with the items that were used to measure satisfaction here. Okay? So that is my point. Every time we design our research instrument, we need to consider what type of construct are we going to use. Are we going to use, for example, a reflective construct, or are we going to use a formative construct? Okay? In a while, sasabihin ko ano yung importance ng pag-identify ng pagkakaiba ng isang reflective and formative construct. Okay? So just remember lang ito, reflective indicators, which are the items of a reflective construct, are essentially interchangeable. Ibig sabihin, pwedeng magkapalit-palit yan. Okay? And therefore, removal of an item does not change the essential nature of the underlying construct. It means, in a reflective construct, kapag reflective ang construct mo, okay, kahit na mag-delete ka ng isang item, the meaning of the construct does not change. So, hindi nagbabago. Okay? Yung meaning ng reflective construct. On the other hand, for formative indicators naman, omitting an indicator is omitting a part of the construct. Ibig sabihin, kung ang variable mo or yung construct mo is a formative construct, if you will be deleting or omitting one item, then the meaning of the whole construct change or will change. Okay? So that's the difference between reflective and formative construct. Okay? Now, if you still remember, I mentioned yesterday that one of the requirements for our designing our instrument is reliability and validity. We mentioned that reliability is a measure of internal consistency. Okay, so we measure yung tinatag nating internal consistency. Okay, and number 2, of course, validity. In validity, we try to measure Okay, so we try to measure validity via discriminant validity and convergent validity. Ano ang ibig sabihin ng validity in general? Validity, ibig sabihin lang yan na dapat hindi naguguluhan ang respondent sa pagsagot ng questionnaire mo. And number two, yung pagkakaintindi mo dun sa questionnaire mo kapareho na pagkakaintindi ng respondent. Okay? So kailangan we try to measure, or we will be measuring validity because we need to avoid these possible problems. Okay? So, yun ang reason bakit tayo nagtitest ng reliability and validity. Okay? Now, as I mentioned, in terms of validity and reliability test, magkaiba ang measurement nila. Okay? For reflective construct, okay, these are the three requirements in order for you to establish that the constructs used in the study are both valid and reliable. Okay? So kapag sinabi nating validity and reliability sa reflective construct, ito yung kailangan nating establish. Number one is reliability, which is a measure of internal consistency. And yung pangalawa and pangatlo, convergent validity and discriminant validity, which is validity test. Okay, so dito mini-measure natin yung validity. This one naman, sa internal consistency, we are measuring reliability. Okay, so you will see here, typically, as I mentioned, most of the published papers usually gumagamit siya ng mga reflective construct. Okay? So sa reflective construct natin, ito yung tatlong requirement. Internal consistency using Cronbach's alpha and composite reliability, convergent validity by analyzing factor loadings and average variance extracted, and discriminant validity using Fournier-Larter criterion and heterotrait monotrait ratio of correlation. Okay? So these are the three requirements for reflective construct. Okay, later magbibigay ako ng mga published papers na nag-exhibit ng tatlong ito. Okay? On the other hand, kapag sinabi naman natin na formative ang ating construct, magkaiba din ang kanyang validity and reliability testing. These are the requirements naman for formative construct. Number one, convergent validity, which is the use of redundancy analysis. Number two is measurement of multicollinearity problem or simply collinearity using variance inflation factor. And number three, we have outer weight and their corresponding significance. So here, we try to measure yung tinatawag nating factor weights and their corresponding P value. Okay? So what have you noticed with formative construct? Okay? In a formative construct, magkaiba. Merong convergent validity, kapareho siya nito, pero mapapansin nyo magkaiba ang approach. For reflective construct, ang ina-analyze natin yung factor loading and the average variance extracted. While for convergent validity, we use redundancy analysis. Later, papakita ko yung mga sample. Number two, wala siyang internal consistency. Okay, for formative, it is only for reflective. Instead, meron siyang collinearity. Okay, anong ibig sabihin ng collinearity? In statistics kasi meron tayong tinatawag nating problem of multicollinearity. In short, para maiwasan natin yung problemang yon, mine-measure natin yung level ng collinearity. Okay, so may mga threshold tayo on how to know whether we were able to meet collinearity or not. And in formative construct, usually ang ginagamit nating measurement dyan is yung pag-evaluate ng kanilang variance inflation factor. Okay, and of course, the last one is outer weight and significance. So in outer weight and significance, as I mentioned, tinitingnan natin yung factor weights and their corresponding P value. So from this, in this slide, you will see magkaiba ang measurement ng validity and reliability ng isang reflective at isang formative construct. Okay? So let's have an example. Magbigay tayo ng example. By the way, this slide naman ay summarized yung requirement or threshold for reliability and the meaning, yung ibig sabihin or definition ng convergent and discriminant validity. For Cronbach's alpha and composite reliability, ang requirement dyan is kailangan ang value nila must be equal to or higher than 0.7 in order for us to say that the construct is highly reliable or basically reliable in general. Okay? So that is the requirements for reliability. So for convergent validity naman, ito yung mga threshold na ginagamit natin. For example, for item or factor loading, ang kanilang value should be at least 0.5 and above. So it should be equal to or greater than 0.5. And their corresponding P value, of course, kailangan 0.05 and below. Okay? And for average variance extracted, ang value niya should be 0.5 and above. So itong table na ito ay already summarized yung mga threshold na kailangan natin para ma-measure natin yung convergent validity. Number 2, sa discriminant validity, as I mentioned, pwede natin gamitin yung Forner-Larker. Okay, tawag natin dyan Forner-Larker criterion because this was established by Forner and Larker in 1981. This is a measure of discriminant validity. Today, meron tayong medyo recent. Ito yung tinatawag nating HTMT criterion or the heterotrait monotrait ratio of correlation. So tawag natin dyan HTMT criterion. Okay? So typically, ang ginagamit natin is yung requirement or yung threshold na sinet ni Gold et al. In 2001 which is 0.9. Okay? So the threshold is 0.9. Okay? So kailangan 0.9 below ang value ng ating HTMT ratios. Okay? For Forner-Larker criterion, paano natin measure yung discriminant validity? The requirement is for each variable, the square root of AVEs should be greater than any of the correlation involving the said variable. Okay? So what does it mean? In Forner-Larker criterion, later papakita ko naman yung example, titignan natin yung diagonal values at yung diagonal values kailangan mas malaki yung values nila kaysa sa mga off-diagonal. Okay? So yon ang criteria for discriminant validity according to Forner and Larker. Just be reminded that Forner-Larker is the traditional measure of discriminant validity. Today, pwede rin natin siyang i-measure using HTMT. Okay, so meron na tayong dalawang approaches ngayon to measure discriminant validity. Okay? So let's have an example. So let's say this one. Ito yung pinakita ko din yesterday. This is a published paper from Asia Pacific Social Science Review. Kapag tinignan natin yung paper na to, okay, gumamit siya ng reflective construct. Okay, so ito yung traditional construct na meron tayo. It is characterized by highly correlated items. Okay, and if you will be looking, meron siya ditong table in screenshot ko. So dito sa table na to, meron siyang item loading, meron siyang average variance extracted, meron siyang composite reliability, at meron siyang Cronbach's alpha. So if you will be looking at it, number 1, measure yung reliability, okay, composite reliability and Cronbach's alpha. Ito siya. So makikita mo yung value niya is 0.942 and 0.930 for the construct employee engagement. Okay, so dito is only for employee engagement. Okay, then the next one, tinignan natin yung kanyang convergent validity. So sa convergent validity, as I mentioned, una mong titignan is yung factor loading. Kailangan ang value nila is 0.5 and above. So if you will be looking at this one, so ito yung kanilang factor loading or item loading, and you will see lahat sila greater than 0.5, which is good. Number 2, titignan mo yung P value niya, kailangan significant sila. Okay? And number 3, titignan mo ang kanyang EVE, kailangan it must be 0.5 and above. So you will see here, 0.643 ang EVE, so ibig sabihin meron siyang discriminant validity. Okay? This is only for employee engagement, one of the variables in this research paper. Okay? This is a summary version of discriminant validity naman. So dito ang ginamit is the Forner-Larker criterion. So dito, paano natin i-interpret ang Forner-Larker? So let's assume ito yung table natin. Tingnan nyo yung diagonal values. When I say diagonal values, I am referring to these 3 values here. Okay? So itong in-encircle ko ditong 3 values, ito yung tinatag nating diagonal values. Then you need to compare yung diagonal values sa mga off-diagonal. Okay? Yung mga off-diagonal. So when I say off-diagonal, I am referring to 0.570, negative 0.288, and negative 0.304. So kung titingnan mo, kailangan, ang requirement is mas mataas yung diagonal values kaysa sa mga off-diagonal. So kapag ganun yung situation, ibig sabihin merong discriminant validity yung mga constructs mo. Okay? So tawag natin dyan Forner-Larker criterion. Okay? Ito naman, dito sa paper na to, this is a study that we did with my colleagues in two universities. One is from UTAR, University Tunku Abdul Rahman University in Malaysia, and Professor Lim, okay, from University Putra, Malaysia. So we did a study this year, actually. This was published early this year at International Journal of Economics and Management, which is managed by University Putra, Malaysia. And it is Scopus Index, currently ranked as Q3 journal. So dito naman, ang ginamit namin for the discriminant validity is yung tinatawag nating HTMT ratio. Okay? So dito, okay, ang threshold na ginagamit natin or ang kadalasan na threshold is yung 0.9. Okay? Ibig sabihin, titignan mo itong mga values na to, itong mga in-underline ko, kailangan ang value nila is 0.9 below. Okay? Kapag nag-manifest ang ganun, ibig sabihin merong discriminant validity yung mga constructs mo. Okay? So this is for reflective construct. Okay? So if you will be looking at it, yon ang requirement for reflective construct. How about if ang variable natin is a formative construct? Okay? For formative construct, as I mentioned, meron tayong tatlong requirements. Number 1, convergent validity using redundancy analysis. Number 2, the measurement of collinearity using variance inflation factor. And number 3, the measurement of outer weight and their corresponding significance. Okay? So, ang una nating ginagawa is yung tinatawag nating redundancy analysis. Redundancy analysis allows us to determine whether or jointly the formative indicators represent the construct of interest adequately. In short, ang convergent validity ina-assure tayo bilang researcher na yung mga items na nakalagay doon sa formative constructs are the items that really measure formative construct. Okay? So, yon ang reason bakit tayo gumagamit ng redundancy analysis. Later, papakita ko sa published paper kung paano nire-report yon. Okay? Number 2, we have what we call collinearity. Okay? So sa collinearity, ang mini-measure natin is of course yung variance inflation factor. So for variance inflation factor, ang purpose pala natin ng measurement ng collinearity, as I mentioned, para hindi maging problematic or hindi tayo magkaroon ng error. Okay, para ma-avoid natin yung possible problem ng collinearity, mini-measure natin yung collinearity. Okay, through VIF. So meron tayong dalawa na threshold na ginagamit. Pwede natin gamitin yung kay Diamantopoulos and Sigwao in 2006 or pwede rin yung suggestion ni Here et al. In 2011. Pero typically, ang ginagamit ng mga researchers ito, yung kay Diamantopoulos and Sigwao in 2006, which is the conservative one. Okay? So dito ang requirement ng value dapat daw ng VIF is 3.3. Okay? Below. Okay? So that is for collinearity. And of course, for outer weight and significance, ang requirement is each of the p-value of the outer weight must be significant, meaning the p-value should be 0.05 below. Okay? So yon ang requirement, tatlo. Okay, for formative construct. Okay? So magbigay tayo ng example. So this is a study where we used a formative construct. Okay, this study is an MBA paper actually. So tinulungan ko yung isang advisee namin to publish a paper together with other panel members. So pinagtulungan namin itong paper na to para ma-publish siya sa isang Q1 journal. This is a prestigious journal, British Food Journal. And successfully, we were able to publish a paper. Okay? I submitted actually the paper in January 2021 this year, and it was accepted March 2021. And the feedback that we received was good. Okay? Because of the methodology that we used for this paper. Okay? So tignan natin yung content. So una, if you will be looking, okay, as I mentioned, itong paper na to, lahat ng constructs niya, they were measured formatively. Okay? If you will be looking the questionnaire on knowledge and food safety, which is one of the variables, okay, or one of the constructs in this study, meron siyang 18 items. Okay? These 18 items are the items that measure knowledge and food safety. Okay? Now, you will see here, kung babasahin natin isa-isa yung mga items hindi talaga sila highly correlated. Why? Because number 1 has something to do with washing of hands. Number 2 has something to do with using of gloves. Number 3 is eating and drinking in the workplace. Number 4 is wearing hairnet or cap, and so on and so forth. Ibig sabihin, these are the causes of knowledge in food safety. Okay? So tawag natin dyan mga formative construct. Okay? Now, you will see here, kapag binasa mo siya, there is one unique characteristic for a formative construct. At ano yung unique characteristic na yon? Ito yung tinatawag nating global item. Okay, what is a global item? A global item is the last item, okay, in a particular construct, particularly formative construct, that provides a question that provides a question on the overall idea of the respondent on a particular construct. Okay, so tawag natin dyan global item. Tingnan nyo yung global item dito. Meron siyang overall, I have a good knowledge about food safety. Okay, so you will see here the last item talks about the overall knowledge of the respondent on food safety. So tawag natin dyan global item. And that is a unique characteristic. Kapag gumamit tayo ng isang formative construct, laging merong isang global item. Okay? Ano yung purpose? Bakit meron tayong global item? Okay? So, ang purpose ng global item is para ma-measure natin yung convergent validity using redundancy analysis. Okay? In redundancy analysis, ang ginagawa natin, kung meron tayong 18 items sa food safety knowledge, okay, 18 items, yung isa global item siya. Am I right? So, ang gagawin natin, i-correlate natin yung 17 items with the one global item. And ang requirement dyan, kailangan ang correlation coefficient niya is greater than 0.7. So you will see here, sa food safety knowledge, meron siyang 17 items and one global item. At nung kinorelate ko siya, it is 0.955, which is greater than 0.7 requirement. So it means meron siyang convergent validity. Same is true with other variables sa ginamit sa study na to, yung attitude and practice. So you will see lahat ng mga correlation coefficient pumasa sa requirement na to. So tawag natin dyan convergent validity using redundancy analysis. Okay? Number 2 is yung measurement ng collinearity. Ang measurement ng collinearity, as I mentioned, titignan mo yung VIF, Variance Inflation Factor. Okay? From the Variance Inflation Factor, tignan mo yung values ng bawat items na nagre-represent ng isang formative construct and try to evaluate kung papasok sila dun sa threshold na 3.3. Okay? Kapag pumasok sila, ibig sabihin you pass the collinearity test. Okay? And lastly, okay, tinitingnan natin yung outer weights and their corresponding significance. So ito yon, outer weights and their corresponding significance, which is the P value. So dito, ang ginagawa lang natin, we evaluate yung P value nila. Okay, so we evaluate yung P value and try to identify ano dyan yung P value, okay, na pumasok sa requirement, which is 0.05 below. Okay? And you will see here, meron ako nilagay dito decision para mas madali siyang basahin. Lahat ng mga outer weights na hindi pumalo dun sa requirement ng p-value, it means kailangan niyang i-delete from the model. Okay? So you will see here, yung may delete, ibig sabihin, hindi sila pumasok sa p-value. Okay? So this is an example of measurement of validity and reliability sa isang formative construct. Okay? So why do I need to discuss this one? Because there are already a research that identified na meron ng mga published papers na nagkamali sa pagmomodel ng kanila or pag-identify ng construct. For example, they are modeled reflective. Okay? They were modeled formative but they should be reflective. Okay? There are times naman they were modeled as reflective pero dapat pala formative sila. Okay? So ang tendency kapag ganon is mali ang nagiging conclusion natin kasi mali ang measurement natin. Okay? So from the onset, kailangan we must be clear whether our construct is formatively measured or reflectively measured. Okay? So let me just recap it. So as I mentioned, for reflective construct, ang requirement natin, internal consistency, convergent validity, and discriminant validity. For formative construct, convergent validity, but we will be using redundancy analysis, collinearity, and outer weight and significance. Okay? So let's have a quick recap muna sa pagdidesign ng instrument. So meron tayong tatlong ways: adapt with O, adapt with A, and develop. So as I mentioned, adapt means you're going to have, or you will be utilizing prior studies instrument or measurement, and you will be using them nearly verbatim. If you're going to alter significantly from an adapted instrument, then it means you are adapting with A. Then if you will be develop a new instrument kasi walang existing, need to develop or do an instrument from the scratch. Okay? And then as I mentioned, understanding kung anong klaseng construct, okay, na meron tayo, very important yan sa pag-design ng ating research instrument. So ito yung binigay ko example kahapon on kapag adapt with O. Okay, so as I mentioned, dito ang ginamit natin is CSR engagements. Okay, we have CSR engagements. Galing yan kay Klein and Dawar and Brown and Dasin in bank. But for example, gagamit tayo ng similar, or we will be utilizing this one, adopting it with O. Ang papalitan lang natin is yung context. So dito, let's say, ang study mo has something to do with TV network CSR engagement. Okay? So this is an example of what we call adapt with O. Okay? Then this is also an example naman. This is an example naman ng adapt with A. Okay? So I scholar at naghanap ako and nakita ko meron isang study. Okay? Wherein ang ginamit niya is nag-adapt siya. Okay? Ng isang research instrument. So this was published in this journal and this is the title. Okay? Then, meron naman isa na nakita ko on the internet also from the Journal of Business Research, develop a new instrument. So, gumawa siya ng bagong measurement on green marketing orientation. Ibig sabihin, walang measurement, current measurement ng green marketing orientation. And the authors was able to produce, okay, yung bagong measurement ng green marketing orientation. So, tawag natin dyan, develop a new instrument. Okay? So, tinignan ko yung content. So ito na yung bagong content. Meron siyang tatlong dimension. Okay? Or I think, yeah, tatlong dimensions. Yung bagong variable na green marketing orientation. Okay? So now, you will see here sa pag-design ng research instrument natin, kapag nag-adapt ka or nag-adapt with A, usually ang requirement dyan is for reflective construct, kailangan natin i-measure yung convergent and discriminant validity and reliability. For formative naman, convergent validity, collinearity, and outer weight and significance. Okay? Kapag you will be developing a new instrument, ang gagamitin naman natin is factor analysis. Okay? So in factor analysis, usually we follow yung exploratory factor analysis and CFA. By the way, if you will be adapting with A, this one, adapting with A, pero pwede mo siyang gamitin din ito kung gusto mong gamitin yung traditional na confirmatory factor analysis. Okay? So pwede yan, CFA lang ang gagamitin mo. No need for EFA. Okay? So these are the requirements. Okay, so maybe I'll stop muna dito. Okay, and if you have any question muna, let's open the floor for questions and clarifications.
Okay, Doc Laka, may I suggest before we entertain some questions coming from the participants, may we have a quick 10-minute break?
Sure.
Okay. Para tuloy-tuloy na po tayo mamaya sa discussion natin. Okay, dear participants, let's just have first a quick 10-minute break. And then we're going, after our break, we're going na to answer all your queries with our speaker. Okay, thank you. back now. Before I read, I think one question lang. So kindly accomplish our attendance form for this session. Dear participants, thank you. So we have here one question, Doc, from Professor Keres. In our discussion with the instrument, do we need to mention these constructs, whether it is reflective or formative?
Okay, my answer is yes, particularly if you will be utilizing both. Kasi as I mentioned, generally speaking, around 80 to 90% ng constructs are reflective. So kung for example, you want to establish yung validity and reliability nila for reflective, then you need to mention that your constructs were measured reflectively. Same is true naman if we will be utilizing formative construct, then you need to mention that your construct were measured formatively. So kailangan natin sinasabi yan para clear sa reader natin kung anong klaseng construct ang ginamit natin. By the way, it is very important na minimension sila kasi there are times, because I noticed there is one defense that I attended, the panel member is insisting na kailangan i-measure yung reliability. And I mentioned, hindi mo ma-measure ang reliability ng isang formative construct kasi ibang construct yan. Ang requirement ng formative constructs are different from reflective constructs. So ito yung sinasabi ko na kapag we treat everything the same, nagkakaroon tayo ng problem dyan. Kasi as I mentioned, constructs can be a reflective construct or a formative construct. And the way we measure validity and reliability are also different.
All right, so anyone pa po who would like to raise any question or queries before I turn over the virtual stage to our speaker? Okay, noted. Thank you, sir. Sabi ni Jessie. Okay, so wala na po ata, Doc. So you may proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Kindly allow me to share my screen again. Okay. So if you still remember yesterday, I mentioned a little of factor analysis. So I will be mentioning it again, just for our participants to have the idea of what factor analysis is. But of course, I will not be doing a demo kung paano ginagamit yan using statistics. But just to give you the idea, factor analysis is a statistical technique that is used to reduce a large number of variables into fewer number of factors. Okay, so it means if you will be creating a new instrument or a new measurement for a particular construct, we tend to use factor analysis. So in factor analysis, meron tayong dalawang klase. We have exploratory factor analysis or EFA and confirmatory factor analysis. Okay, so these are the two approaches pag nagpo-factor analysis tayo. So let's try to differentiate what EFA and CFA are all about. So let's start with exploratory factor analysis. Exploratory factor analysis, from the word self, it means we try to explore our data, provide the researcher with information about how many factors are needed to best represent the data. In short, in exploratory factor analysis, kung gagawa tayo ng panibagong construct, let's say gagawa tayo ng construct, papangalanan natin siyang let's say letter na lang Z. Okay, so our new construct is Z. Okay, and let's say based sa initial assessment mo, meron siyang let's say 30 items. Okay, na magme-measure dito. So gumawa ka ng 30 items to measure the construct Z. Okay, sa exploratory factor analysis, we will be exploring all these 30 items para malaman natin kung ano lang ang items na to ang nagme-measure talaga ng construct na letter Z. Okay, that's the reason we call it as exploratory factor analysis. Okay, in exploratory factor analysis, all items or indicators are related to every factor through a factor loading estimate. It means itong 30 items na to, kailangan yung 30 items na nilagay mo as a measure or as an indicator of a variable or construct Z are all related. Okay, and exploratory factor analysis is performed when little is known about the factor structure, construct, or variable. When I say little is known, posibleng merong existing instrument pero hindi clear, or kulang yung pag-aaral, or walang pag-aaral at all. Okay, that's the reason as I mentioned kung magde-develop ka ng isang instrument because walang existing literature about that particular construct or walang existing measurement, okay, yung particular construct na yon, okay, then you can use exploratory factor analysis. One example that I can think of right now is this one. I came across with a study before, yung tinatawag nating happiness at work. Okay? And naghanap ako ng published papers kung meron ng gumawa nito na measurement at meron naman I think 2 pa lang, and based dun sa mga dun sa existing instrument hindi pa ganun ka-robust yung kanilang measurement. So in this case, if you want to create a better measure of happiness at work, then you can use exploratory factor analysis. Okay? So this technique is based on the decision of a software. For example, you can use AMOS, which is under IBM SPSS, or Jamovi, which is a free version, a freeware, in which the results are produced from the correlation statistic, but not from theory. Okay, so exploratory factor analysis is basically the initial stage of factor analysis, particularly if you will be creating a new instrument, okay, or a new measurement for a particular construct. On the other hand, ano naman yung confirmatory factor analysis? So confirmatory factor analysis is a technique that is based on well-developed measurement theory to confirm that the indicators is measuring the construct. So you will see here, diba, kung gagawa ka ng panibagong construct, ang unang step mo is you will be exploring muna yung mga items. So once na na-reduce mo na yan, let's say nakita mo from 30 naging 10 na lang kasi yun talaga yung 10 nagme-measure ng variable Z or construct Z. Ang next na gagawin mo ngayon, i-confirm mo kung yung 10 yun are the real 10 items that measure construct Z. So tawag natin dyan confirmatory, kaya tinag siyang confirmatory factor analysis. It's used when a priori factor construct exists. When we say a priori, ibig sabihin before. Ibig sabihin bago pa i-float sa general public or sa respondents mo, kailangan nag-undergo na yan ng confirmatory factor analysis. When conducting CFA, one cannot delete or omit more than 20% of the items in the model. Okay, doing so, one has to resort to EFA. Ibig sabihin, for example, kanina sinabi natin yung Z, ang original items niya naging are 30. Then based on exploratory factor analysis, 10. Okay, na lang ang natira. So yung 10 yon i-confirm natin. So yung variable Z, meron siyang 10 items ngayon. Ngayon, kung i-confirmatory factor analysis mo yan, kailangan ang pwede mo lang i-delete dyan is maximum, okay, of 20%. So 20% ng 10, yun lang ang pwede mong i-delete. Kapag sumobra ka dyan, babalik ka ulit sa exploratory factor analysis. That's the reason I mentioned tedious ang factor analysis. Okay, hindi siya madali kasi it is really rigorous, and at the same time, since you are creating a new measurement for a particular new construct, medyo mahirap siya kasi as I mentioned, minimum 2 data collection ka dyan. Okay? It is not entirely appropriate to conduct CFA based on EFA results, and that CFA and EFA cannot be conducted using the same set of data. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Hindi isang data ang gagamitin mo dito. Separate data sila. So, ang unang data collection mo, ang gagamitin natin dyan for exploratory factor analysis. Ang second data collection mo, ang gagamitin natin dyan confirmatory factor analysis. Pwede pang mag-additional yan kung hindi mo talaga nakukuha yung tamang items that measure construct Z. Kaya sinabi ko na, even kahapon, sabi ko, minimum ng 2 data collection ang factor analysis. Okay? So that is exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis. Okay? So ito yung sinabi ko kanina. Okay? Kung adapt, pwedeng gamitin yan ito, yung diniscuss natin. Pero kapag nag-develop ka, magpo-factor analysis ka na. Okay? So ito naman is questionnaire translation. I think si Prof. Bragas yesterday, meron siyang question about this one or clarification about questionnaire translation. Of course, what is the reason bakit tayo magta-translate ng questionnaire? One, kailangan kino-consider natin yung respondents natin, yung level ng comprehension nila sa language or saan sila comfortable na language sa pagsagot ng questionnaire natin. So let's assume, this is just an example, assuming you adopted a questionnaire, okay, and at the same time, ngayon you will be utilizing it with Filipino respondents. Pero yung respondents mo, ang kanilang pinaka-comfortable na language is Filipino or Tagalog. So ang anong gagawin natin ngayon? So from the original English question, gagawin natin siyang Filipino. But the question is, paano ba ang tamang process ng pag-translate ng isang questionnaire? Okay, ito yung mga different steps. Okay, of course, we have a preparation. Okay? So, of course, dito sa preparation stage, kailangan tingnan mo kung saan mo kukunin or ano yung a-adapt mo na instrument. Okay, na ita-translate natin. Number 2, you need to translate the source language into target language. So, ang second step natin, once na na-identify mo na, magbigay tayo ng example. Let's say, job satisfaction. Okay, and let's say, galing ito kay David 2000. So galing kay David 2000. Ngayon, gagamitin mo yung instrument ni David 2000 about job satisfaction pero ngayon gusto mo Tagalog siya. Okay? So here, sa second step natin yan, we will be translating it from English, okay, to Filipino or Tagalog. Okay? So ipapa-translate natin yan. Now, paano ang translation process? Ang translation process is, ang kailangan is you need to have at least 2 bilingual translators. So kailangan meron kang makakakuha ka ng 2 bilingual translators. When I say bilingual, marunong sila ng English at marunong sila ng Filipino. Sila ang magta-translate nung ating questionnaire from English to Filipino. So hindi natin yan ginagawa by ourselves kung hindi naman tayo eksperto. Okay, sa language. Okay, number 3. Once na na-translate na from English to Filipino, so yung instrument mo, from English naging Filipino na siya, the third step is translate the target language back to the source language. Ibig sabihin, magbaback translate ka. So from English to Filipino, kapag na-translate mo na siya into Filipino, ipa-translate mo ulit siya from Filipino to English. Okay? Bakit tayo bumabalik ulit sa English? Simply because we need to assure that the consistency ng meaning hindi nawawala. Ibig sabihin, from English to Filipino, kapag tinranslate natin siya from English to Filipino at kapag binalik natin siya from Filipino to English, pareho pa rin ang meaning ng mga statements natin. Okay? So tawag natin doon back translation. So that is actually step number 3. Okay? Then for step number 4, meron pa usually committee review yan. I-check kung tama yung pag-translate. Step number 5 if you field test. Okay, so ipapatest muna natin o ipapilot test muna natin kung okay yung ating questionnaire na na-translate. And finally, we will be reviewing and finalize the translation. Okay, so those are the 6 steps when we talk about translating our instrument from the source language to the target language. Okay, so hindi lang siya by the use of Google Translator kasi meron din siyang scientific process sa pag-translate ng ating mga questionnaire. Okay? Next, I want to emphasize also yung tinatawag nating reverse coding. Reverse coding is a process wherein some items in our questionnaires are worded backwards. Okay, ibig sabihin usually negatively worded sila. So kung meron tayong let's say 10 items that measure job satisfaction, yung isa negatively worded. Tawag natin doon is reverse coding. Okay? So paano natin ginagawa ang reverse coding? Okay, and ano yung purpose ng reverse coding? Sa social science, particularly in psychology, napansin ko very common ang reverse coding. Sa business kahit hindi, kasi napansin ko din na hindi usually nagre-reverse code yung mga nasa business. So, but just to give you the idea, anong ibig sabihin ng reverse coding or yung tinatawag nating questionnaire items that are worded backwards. Let's assume meron tayong construct, food quality. And let's say, ito yung 4 na items na nagme-measure ng food quality. let's try to analyze yung first three muna, yung tatlo muna. Okay? The first three items, kung babasahin natin sila, they are all positive statements. CCA canteen serves tasty food. CCA canteen presents viand or food in a visually appealing manner. CCA canteen serves viand or food at the appropriate temperature. Okay, but you will see at statement number 4, CCA canteen serves stale food, walang lasa. This is basically an item that is worded backwards. So kung sasagutin yan ng respondents, let's say ang sagot niya dito, CCA canteen serves tasty food, strongly agree. CCA canteen presents viand or food in a visually appealing manner, strongly agree. CCA canteen serves viand or food that is are appropriate in temperature, strongly agree. And since this is negatively stated or backwardly stated, ang sagot of course ng student dito would be opposite. What? Strongly disagree. Okay? So you will see here, meron isang item na worded backwards. Ano yung purpose? Bakit tayo nag-worded backwards? Simply because we want to test whether yung mga respondents natin, binasa nila yung items. Because there are tendency na yung mga respondents natin, kapag binigyan natin sila ng checklist at nag-check lang sila or nagtitik lang sila, isang column lang ang tinitik. Ibig sabihin, posibleng hindi naman nila talaga binasa yung items. But with a negatively worded or backwardly worded item, ang tendency kapag nabasa nila yan, of course, opposite yung magiging sagot nila. So tawag natin dyan reverse coding. Now, bakit siya reverse coding? Kasi kung itatabulate natin yan sa Excel file, okay, so sa Excel file natin, di ba? Let's say meron kang respondent 1. Tapos yung item mo for item 1, meron siyang 5. Okay, let's assume again sa Excel file mo meron kang respondent 1. And let's say meron kang food quality here. So yung food quality meron siyang tatlong items. So let's name it as item 1. Okay, item 1, item 2, item 3, and item 4. So kung nasa Excel file yan, kapag i-code natin yan or itatabulate natin, since sa sagot ni respondent 1 sa item 1 is 5, ang ilalagay natin is 5. Sa item 2, 5 also. Item 3 is also 5. Sa item 4 ngayon, since backward worded ito, ang tendency, di ba, ang sagot niya is 1, ang gagawin mo, i-reverse code mo siya. Ano yung opposite ng 1? It is 5. So ang sagot, ang ilalagay mong tabulation dito would be 5. Okay? Same is true, let's say si respondent 2. Let's say si respondent 2 ang sagot niya. Let's say dito is 4. Let's say dito is also 4. Dito is 5. And let's say dito ang sagot niya is 2. Okay? So paano natin itatabulate yan? So 4, 4, 5. Dito ang opposite ng 2 would be 4. So ang tabulation niyan is 4. Tawag natin dyan reverse coding. Okay? So that is also an important aspect sa pag-design ng instrument and lalo na kapag itatabulate na natin yung responses. Okay? Number 3, I want to emphasize also yung importance ng pre-testing. Okay? So ano ang ginagawa natin sa pre-testing stage? Okay? Typically kapag pag natapos ang proposal defense, okay, dapat pine-perform itong dalawang steps na to. Ito yung tinatawag nating pre-testing. Okay, this is it is performed to address the following: yung format, layouts, lengths, sequencing, quality of items ng ating questionnaire. So ito yung pre-testing stage. Okay? So dito sa pre-testing, bago pa natin i-float yan, tingnan natin yung format muna, yung layout, yung length, yung sequencing, yung quality ng mga items. Kaya di ba, if you still remember dun sa process natin, meron tayong face validity, content validity for pre-testing stage. For pilot testing naman, dito naman yung ano natin, ginagawa natin, we try to measure yung feasibility, okay, nung pag-gather natin ng data, kaya ba natin makagather ng data, yung time, yung cost, and of course yung possible adverse event. Like for example today, yung pinakakalaban natin is COVID-19. Medyo nahihirapan tayo sa data collection. That's why we resort to online data collection. We try to measure also yung effect size, particularly yung appropriate sample size, kung tama ba yung sample size natin, which was discussed also yesterday. And of course, The pilot testing, the purpose of this one is to improve the study design before the full survey is performed. Ibig sabihin, bago natin yan i-float, sa na-compute natin na sample size, kailangan okay na ang instrument. That's the reason meron tayong tinatag nating pre-testing and pilot testing stage. Okay? So, yun muna for ang ating discussion. Do you have any question or clarification? So, that ends yung ating discussion on questionnaire design.
Okay. Do you have any questions po from our participants? Ako, Doc Lakap, may clarification lang po ako with regard to the use of yung dun sa language translation. I was just wondering, is this a process also applicable to undergraduate research students when they are doing or need to translate yung kanilang survey questionnaire? Kasi parang nakita ko very tedious, quite expensive on their part. So would you suggest ba na again, pumalik kay Google. No, I'm just joking. So, din ba, is it really a must for research undergraduate students to undergo this kind of tedious and quite, I think, complicated process in translating their survey questionnaire?
Scientifically, we really need to follow, okay, yung mga sinabi ko because that is the scientific way of translating the research, particularly kung yung research natin is for publication purposes. Okay? If for example sa undergrad, I really do not know what is yung protocol ng PUP about undergrad thesis, but if you will be asking me personally, siguro kung wala tayong established protocol on language translation, most probably ang pinaka-importante among the steps kasi yung mga translators natin. Ibig sabihin, for example, yung bilingual translators. Usually, meron naman tayong ganyan. Like, for example, kung meron tayong Filipino department, tingnan natin kung meron tayong mga bilingual doon. Ibig sabihin, marunong ng Tagalog, marunong ng English. Then, they can probably help our students in translating the research instrument. This is also a major consideration kapag gumagawa tayo ng research sa undergrad. Lagi ko sinasabi, kapag sa undergrad, even also sa master's level, lagi ko sinasabi, ano ba ang timeline nyo? Okay, kasi sa student, meron tayong timeline kasi semestral, right? Required subject siya. So, lagi ko sinasabi, kapag gagawa kayo ng research, kino-consider nyo matatapos nyo ba siya ng ganitong semester lang? Okay? So, kung sa tingin mo, yung study mo will require you more time at hindi mo siya matatapos, maybe kailangan mag-isip ka ng medyo mas madaling topic. Okay? But for masters kasi ganun din yung sinasabi ko. Lagi kasi tinatanong ng advices ko sa akin, sir, ano po yung deadline ko? Ang lagi ko sinasabi, nasa sayo ang deadline. I am just here to guide you. So yung speed mo sa pagsulat, nakadepende sa'yo kasi ikaw yung gagawa niyan. Number 2, I always tell them, always think of your topic. Kung you are really looking forward na matapos mo siya, for example, this year, this is just an example, kailangan mo talaga ng topic na talaga pwede siya dun sa timeline mo. But if you do not have any timeline, pwede kang gumawa ng study as elaborate as you want. Okay? Kasi nasa sayo pa rin naman yan kasi ikaw yung gagawa nun. So maybe yun yung mga major considerations natin kapag advisor tayo. Lagi natin binibigyan ng options yung mga estudyante kung ano yung gusto nilang topic at ano yung timeline. Ako kasi personally, yun yung una ko tinatanong, ano yung timeline mo. Okay? Then I will give my opinion based sa topic na gusto mo. Kasi ang gusto ko, kapag alam niyo yung timeline, tatanungin ko sino yung target respondents at bibigyan ko siya ng scenario kung gano'n niya kabilis or katagal pwede makagather ng data based sa timeline niya. Kasi typically, Prof, ang pinakamatagal dyan, aside dun sa pag-design ng instruments, is yung data gathering. Okay? So kasi kapag tumatagal tayo dyan, ang tendency, of course, mas napapahaba yung time natin sa pagtapos ng ating mga research undertaking. So maybe pwede natin pa-consider yon kapag nag-conceptualize ng topic yung mga estudyante natin both sa undergrad and the graduate school level.
Yeah, but that would be a good idea and a good practice na we can involve some department. Like for example, yung sabi niyo, the Filipino department and then the English department. That would make them quite easy for them, di ba? And then with the help also of those professionals. Thank you, Doc Laka. But I think we have one question pa. Again, from a very, very, very engaging, vibrant chief of PASUK. Do you think, sir, from Ma'am Keres, do you think, sir, that it would be wise to have this global item on the instrument, the same with this worded backwards items?
Okay, for the global item is used if, for example, your construct is a formative construct. Requirement yun kasi gagamitin natin yung global item for redundancy analysis. Doon naman po sa backward or reverse coded, okay, reverse coding yung mga worded backwards, sinasuggest ko ba sila? Personally sa business, hindi naman siya kailangan kasi based sa nababasa ko, konti lang yung mga business topics na gumagamit ng reverse coding. Even myself, minsan kasi baka malito pa ako sa pagtatabulate. So ginagawa ko, hindi na lang ako nagre-reverse code. So sa most probably hindi naman talaga siya requirement. But for psychology, kasi doon ko sila usually nakikita sa mga research under psychology, usually yung instrument nila, meron talaga silang worded backwards na items. Siguro it has something to do, lalo na kung i-measure nila yung psychometric properties ng isang particular construct. Kaya meron silang nagre-reverse code sila. But for business like us, usually hindi ko naman siya sinasuggest talaga yung reverse coding. But in case that you want, okay, yun yung process natin, yung tinuro ko kanina.
Alright. Thank you, Doc. So, is there any question pa to raise? You may opt to unmute po your microphone so that you can directly raise your question or query to our speaker. I would like to recognize the presence of our Dean, College Dean, Dr. Guillermo Bongato, for spending some time with us. Hello, Dean. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, Dean, good afternoon po. Wala na. Meron po ba? Okay, I think Doc Lakap wala na po ata.
Okay. So actually maybe you can also ask question based on your experience. For example, sa paggawa ng instruments, there are cases, for example, may mga instrument, actually based on my experience lang po ito, there are sometimes yung mga estudyante yung ginamit nilang instrument, hindi na-test ng validity or reliability. Pero since the process ng yung data, pinapayagan na natin siya. But technically po kasi hindi dapat acceptable yon. Okay, kasi part ng scholarly writing or scientific writing yung pagpo-prove natin ng validity and reliability. Kaya very important sa research process, particularly sa advising part natin sa mga student natin in the graduate school, to properly hone them to be researchers, particularly sa paggawa ng research instrument. Research instrument is very vital kasi dito manggagaling yung data natin na ipaprocess natin para makakuha tayo ng results at magiging basis natin para makagawa tayo ng sound conclusions. Okay? Kaya kapag mali yung ating instrument, mataas din yung chance na mali din yung conclusion ng ating paper. So ibig sabihin walang value yung paper natin kapag alam natin na hindi sound yung paggawa ng ating research instruments.
Okay. I think, sir, may question pa po si Ma'am Jess. Sir, is it okay lang po ba if reliability test lang ang nagawa ng mga students sa undergrad po?
Technically speaking, again, scientifically speaking, kailangan talaga reliability and validity ang kailangan. Siguro kung, for example, kung wala pang expertise yung mga estudyante natin to perform discriminant and convergent validity, I would suggest pwedeng i-run using reliability pero kailangan supported ng literature na yung mga yung mga construct na yun were previously measured in terms of validity, like for example, convergent and discriminant. Kasi scientifically speaking po kasi yung scholarly way talaga ng paggawa ng isang instrument, kailangan, di ba dalawa yung major characteristic ng ating construct, kailangan reliable siya and at the same time valid siya. Kaya sa graduate studies talaga kailangan kasi ano yan, kapag natapos kasi sila, di ba, masters. So ibig sabihin there's a certain form of expertise sa level nila. So part of that expertise should be research. Okay? Kasi pinagpo-produce tayo ng mga graduate student, GS graduates. Okay? Graduate school student, graduates. Okay? So kailangan both validity and reliability na establish natin yan.
Okay. So any questions from our participants? Parang gustong magtanong ata ni Dr. Aki. Dr. Aki, would you like to ask something to our speaker?
Hi po, Doc Jean Paulo. Ako po ulit. Mangungulit. Good afternoon po. Doc, when it comes to proposal defense po ba, paano po ba ang magiging sistema? Kailangan na po bang i-present ng mga estudyante ang kanilang validity at saka reliability ng instrument or hindi pa muna kailangan?
Depende, Doc, sa institution. But sa amin, sa practice namin, hindi pa naman. Pero kailangan meron na siyang sample instrument para lang makita kung ano yung mga items that measure yung construct. Kasi yung naman validity and reliability kapag ang tawag dito, alam yan ng statistician, madali lang naman yung gawin. Kasi statistics yan numbers yung pinag-uusapan dyan. So usually sa proposal defense, typically kami kasi ang requirement, meron na siyang instrument para lang makita yung contents para kung may mababago pa, okay, pwede pang baguhin. So pwedeng mangyari na after ng proposal defense, doon natin establish yung validity and reliability. So doon tayo magpi-pre-testing and pilot testing.
Maraming salamat po.
Okay. Okay, so from Dr. D. Guzman po, good afternoon po, Doc Lakap. Thanks for comment lang po pala ito. Teka muna, sorry. Good afternoon po, Doc Lakap. Thanks for educating us always. My question is, what if done na po ang mga bata sa reliability test, mga batas ongoing with their validity test na, then all of a sudden, sasabihin ng advisor to use Loven's formula for sampling grown, but the students are done with that using purposive sampling. Paano po kaya yon, Doc?
Okay, so medyo complicated yung question ni Doc De Guzman. Actually, part kasi ng scholarly writing natin is yung pag-identify ng ating sample size calculation. So from the onset, kailangan na-identify na natin kung ano yung sample size calculation natin. Again, it is a must na na-identify na natin beforehand yung sample size calculation. Then part ng by the way, yung reliability and validity using software, pwedeng i-measure yan simultaneously. Ibig sabihin, using your data, okay, kapag pinasok mo yan sa software, automatic kino-compute niya pareho, simultaneous. Okay, so wala tayong nagiging problem sa validity and reliability. Okay, kailangan lang natin na i-prove na valid and reliable yung constructs natin. Okay, I really do not know kung paano natin aatakihin yon, but once kasi na-prove na reliable and valid ang ating instrument, then that would be the time that we can claim the soundness of our conclusions. Then yung po kasi purposive sampling is basically a sampling technique. Of course, marami tayong sampling technique na pwedeng gamitin. But I would suggest kasi kung Sloven's formula siya, I do not think Sloven's formula will work with purposive sampling. That's one. Because yung pinakita ko yesterday na sample paper na na-publish by 2 statisticians from UP School of Statistics, they already identified yung downside ng Sloven's formula. So I would suggest that from the onset, kailangan clear na kung ano yung sampling technique, paano mo i-calculate yung sample size mo, and ma-establish mo ng tama yung reliability and validity ng ating instrument or ng mga constructs na gagamitin natin sa ating research. May justification po mga bata why they use purposive sampling. Of course, we really need to explain in the method section ng paper natin yung bakit tayo gumagamit ng purposive sampling. Okay, so kailangan meron laging justification yung mga claims natin. Like for example, kung purposive sampling, bakit purposive sampling? At paano mo gagawin yung purposive sampling technique sa pagkuha or sa pag-identify ng ating respondent. So laging may justification yan. Same is true even for example, kung gagamit ka ng particular statistical test, you need to justify bakit yon ang appropriate statistical test. Same is true kung gagamit ka ng particular research design, bakit yon ang appropriate research design. Laging may justification kasi we really need to explain well bakit ito yung mga appropriate. Tomorrow papakita ko yung criteria na usually nahanap kung magpa-publish tayo, and makikita natin na one of the reasons bakit nare-reject ang paper sa mga top journals is it is simply because we fail to explain and justify yung appropriateness ng methodology natin. Okay? As I know, di masyadong use ang Sloven's formula. Actually, Prof. De Guzman, to tell you honestly, parang sa Pilipinas lang yata ginagamit ng Slovenes. Kasi sa mga top journals, wala akong nakikitang Slovenes. Ang ginagamit nila ngayon yung mga emerging sampling technique, sample size calculations. Like for example, yung diniscuss ko yesterday, yung use of G-power. Kung traditional, gumagamit sila ng Rausov. Kung much advanced, gumagamit sila ng inverse square root and gamma exponential. But with Slovenes, it seems, mostly sa tagal kong nagre-review ng papers sa mga journals, usually kapag Slovenes, alam ko na galing sa Philippines yung paper. Okay, parang tayo lang yung gumagamit ng Slovenes. Kaya personally, I discourage the use of Slovenes kasi nga na-explain na yan ng isang paper na sinasabi niya na may maraming downside ng Slovenes formula. So hindi ko talaga siya pinapagamit. Even though nung nag-aaral ako, tinuro din sa amin yan. So sabi ko nga, there are points talaga in our lives that we need to unlearn things and relearn things. Okay? So siguro this is also a high time for us para ma-recalibrate tayo sa mga new techniques para mas malaman natin yung rigor ng paggawa ng research.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure that Ma'am Bel has this so much clarification with regard to this matter or her concern. Okay, so Doc Aki, again, meron ka pa atang i-raise na question. Ay, unstable daw ang connection niya. Sir. Ayan na po. Okay, sige Doc Aki.
Hello po, Doc Paulo.
Good afternoon.
Okay, parang na-lost connection siya, Doc. Parang ang question niya po ay yung statistical power is only used for, kasi magkatabi lang kami, Doc, is only used for SEM po, structural equation model. Yun lang daw po.
The statistical power can also be used in first-generation statistical tests like correlation, regression, ANOVA, t-test. Kung gagamit tayo ng G-power to estimate our sample size. Ang PLSM, mas maganda na gumagamit tayo talaga ng statistical power. Kaya ang usual na suggestion ko, use G-power or use inverse square root and gamma exponential as your way to calculate your sample size. But again, yung statistical power na sinabi ko yesterday can also be utilized with first-generation statistical tests, yung mga traditional tests na alam natin.
Thank you very much daw po, sir. Okay, Sir Ronnie Idian, you are muted po. Unmute, sorry. You are unmute. Would you like to ask something? Ronnie, good afternoon. Kasi naka-unmute po siya ng microphone niya. Baka pa lost. Ayan na. So Ronnie. Okay, so parang
You are muted, Prof.
sorry. Anyone pa po from our participants? I think Sir Ronnie has internet problem, connection problem. Pero naka-unmute siya. Okay, anyone pa po from the participants? Before we let go our speaker for this session.